The vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly before the crew of the Ravager, their mission to explore a remote sector, one where no Galactic Council fleet had ventured. Its cold, black void felt suffocating, yet the crew aboard the sleek warship was focused, their minds sharp. Captain Ulrich Varn stood at the bridge, staring ahead at the unfamiliar sector. He'd commanded ships in hostile zones before, but this was different. There was something almost unnatural about the silence. Above the rhythmic pulse of the ship's vital systems, the view screen flickered as it focused on the small blue planet in the distance. "Earth," Varn muttered under his breath, lips barely moving. "Sir, we've detected unusual signals," Lieutenant Gorick called out, his sharp voice cutting through the tension. The low, steady pulse of the ship's instruments reverberated through the deck, subtle yet ever-present. He stared at his console, a map of the planet's surface now on the screen. Primitive technology by our standards, but there's no mistaking it. This planet harbors intelligent life. Varn's four eyes narrowed. "Show me their cities." His mind raced. Was this just another unrefined species, or something more? His antennae twitched slightly, a habit he hadn't fully learned to control, betraying his growing curiosity. The screen displayed a sprawling network of artificial lights. Cities glowed in the night, drawing lines across the surface like veins, a clear sign of civilization far beyond the state of many worlds within the Council's jurisdiction. The sight ignited something inside him, a feeling he couldn't place. "Ambassador Ferran is ready for the first contact," Gorick said, glancing toward the back of the room where Ferran, a tall, stoic member of their council, stood observing the scene with quiet intensity. Varn didn't answer immediately. His gaze shifted from the cities to the deep darkness around them. "Prepare the team. We'll be setting course for orbital insertion shortly. Earth is our next challenge." The officers scattered to their stations. The low whir of equipment and the quiet movement of feet were the only sounds on the bridge. It was strange, in this vast isolation, to feel so small. His fingers gripped the cold metal console, its coolness grounding him. The thought of what lay ahead, a first contact with a species that could change everything, warranted his full attention. Yet there was a nagging unease, a gut feeling that told him the truth was not as simple as it appeared. He stared at the shimmering planet as the Ravager glided silently towards it, its sleek form blending with the endless stars. This mission wasn't just about discovery, it was about domination. But first, they needed to understand what they were up against. The Ravager edged closer to Earth, its sensors scanning the planet's surface as it descended into the planet's atmosphere. Varn's eyes flicked to the view screen, the blue orb growing larger, its surface slowly unveiling oceans and continents, a planet brimming with life. The usual weight of silence in space felt unnervingly thick now. For all the instruments at his disposal, nothing could fully explain what lay beneath the surface of this world. "Captain, we've initiated the orbital descent." Gorick's voice snapped him out of his thoughts. The tension that had gathered since their first contact with Earth was palpable, thickening the air around him. The subtle scrape of boots against metal seemed out of place, as if even the ship's crew were conscious of the gravity of the moment. Ferran, ever the calm presence, stood at the side, his deep-set eyes unreadable. "We need to proceed carefully," he advised, his voice steady, but Varn could sense his underlying unease. The ambassador's antennae twitched, barely perceptible, but still noticeable. It was a small gesture, but one that Varn had learned to trust. Ferran was never this agitated, not unless the situation was dire. "Once we make contact, we'll need to make sure their leaders understand the full scope of our intentions," Varn replied, his voice clipped. He could feel the vibrations of the ship as the descent continued, subtle but unmistakable. The metal frame of the Ravager groaned as it adjusted course, pulling them deeper into the atmosphere. Outside the viewport, the planet seemed to rush toward them, its colors more vibrant now, pulling him into a strange sense of foreboding. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation. The metallic tang of the ship's air filters mixed with the faint smell of burnished metal, an ever-present reminder of the technology that kept them alive. It clung to the back of his throat, sharp but oddly comforting in its familiarity. The low rumble of the ship's thrusters against the atmosphere added a rhythm to the moment, but it did little to ease the tension. "We're entering the coordinates now," Gorick continued, his fingers flying across the console. "Estimated touchdown in 30 minutes. Varn remained silent. He had never felt the weight of a first contact so deeply. Every instinct in his body screamed that this mission was more than just the usual diplomatic endeavor. Earth was hiding something not easily discernible from the signals they had intercepted. Beneath the facade of an underdeveloped species, there was a simmering power that threatened to unravel the order they had worked so hard to maintain. The ship finally broke through the dense clouds, revealing the sprawling human metropolis below. From above, the lights of the cities stretched across the globe like veins pulsing with energy. He couldn't help but feel a flicker of admiration for the sheer scale of human accomplishment. Yet that feeling was soon replaced with a creeping suspicion, an almost tangible ripple of unrest. What were they hiding beneath all this? Why such urgency in their invitation? As the Ravager touched down gently on the Earth's surface, the heat of the moment bore down on Varn. He was now on the threshold of a new chapter for the Galactic Council. The next step would reveal everything: their strength, their strategy, and perhaps the hidden dangers that lay beneath their surface. Varn knew deep down that the decision to land here would change everything. "Ready the team," Varn ordered sharply, his gaze fixed on the approaching meeting site. The warships, hidden in plain sight, could no longer stay secret. As the Ravager settled onto the surface, its landing thrusters hissing softly, the oppressive weight of Earth's atmosphere pressed in on them. The smell of dust and freshly disturbed earth filled the air, an unfamiliar, earthy contrast to the sterile, metallic sense of their ship. Varn felt the sensation of gravity tugging at his body, heavier here than in the cold reaches of space. He stood still for a moment, letting the pull of the planet ground him, but his mind remained unfocused, slipping in and out of awareness as he considered what lay ahead. He could almost hear the distant thrum of human voices, faintly vibrating in the very air he breathed, as if the planet itself were alive with secrets. "Ready, Captain?" Gorick's voice cut through the silence, bringing him back to the moment. "Yeah, ready," Varn replied, his voice flat, though his thoughts were far from it. The view outside the ship had shifted from the vast expanse of space to the sharp, jagged silhouette of skyscrapers rising against a sky streaked with orange as the sun began to set. The city, sprawling in every direction, looked like a patchwork of light, organized chaos humming below them. The rest of the team had gathered, their boots clicking softly against the metal floor as they moved into position. Each step seemed deliberate, filled with the knowledge that this moment would set the course for the future. Furon, standing at the rear of the group, adjusted the collar of his uniform. His antennae twitched, betraying the faintest hint of apprehension. It was the first time Varn had seen him unsettled. "Keep your wits about you," Varn instructed, his voice a low growl. "We don't know what we're walking into." The doors of the Ravager slid open with a hiss, releasing them into the cool evening air. The transition from the ship's sterile atmosphere to the vibrant pulse of Earth was immediate. The sounds of the outside world washed over them, the distant murmur of voices, the rhythmic pulse of vehicle engines, and the soft rustle of leaves swaying in the wind. It felt chaotic, yet strangely alive. The city sprawled beneath them, vast and intricate like an open web, each thread connected by unseen forces. A human delegation awaited them, a group of neatly dressed figures standing in the clearing near the landing zone. The moment Varn's boots hit the ground, the human representatives straightened, their eyes trained on the approaching group. There was a nervous energy in the air that Varn could feel as much as he could see. They were on the edge of something unknown, something massive. But what? "Captain Varn, I presume?" The voice came from a man stepping forward from the group, his hand extended in greeting. Varn studied him for a moment before responding, "Yes." "And you are?" "President Dallin," the man replied, a firm handshake following his introduction. His eyes held no warmth, but there was no hostility either. It was the look of someone accustomed to power and the weight of responsibility. "Pleasure," Varn said, though the word felt false. He wasn't here for pleasantries. The air shifted then, a subtle but unmistakable change in the atmosphere, as if the planet itself were holding its breath. Varn's skin prickled, and he felt a gnawing sensation in his stomach. There was something in the air, something hidden. "We've been watching you," Dallin said, his tone carefully neutral. "We knew this day would come, but we weren't prepared for it to come so soon." The words lingered between them, heavy with meaning. Varn had heard the rumors, the whispers. This wasn't just about peaceful coexistence. There was something more, something beneath the surface of Earth's polite exterior, something that neither the Council nor its emissaries would ever have expected. As the wind picked up, swirling the scent of Earth's soil through the air, Varn caught a glimpse of something in the distance, a flash of light, too quick to pinpoint. His heart skipped a beat. The planet was holding its secrets tightly, but for how much longer? The wind stirred around them as the delegation from Earth escorted Captain Varn and his team toward a sprawling glass-and-steel building. The city stretched in every direction, the weight of its civilization pressing down on Varn like an unspoken challenge. Beneath the polished surfaces, beneath the sleek architecture, there was something raw, something hidden, just out of reach. As he walked, the sounds of the bustling city faded into the background, leaving only the steady rhythm of his own breath, heavy with unspoken thoughts. The air was dense with uncertainty, thick like the feeling of walking into an unknown storm. President Dallin led them inside, his footsteps firm, his gaze fixed ahead. Varn watched the man carefully, noting the tightness around his eyes, the subtle clench of his jaw. There was tension in the air that no one seemed willing to acknowledge openly. Even Furon, the ever-composed ambassador, seemed distant, his antennae twitching in small, deliberate motions. Inside the building, the atmosphere changed, cooler and more sterile, like stepping into an artificial cocoon. The scent of freshly cut wood and synthetic material filled the room, a stark contrast to the earthy freshness of the outdoors. The walls seemed to pulse with energy, but it wasn't warmth. It was the sharp, sterile energy of a place that thrived on control. "We've arranged a meeting with the Council's emissaries," Dallin said, his voice clipped, almost too controlled. "It's not every day we meet beings from another galaxy." Varn didn't respond immediately. Instead, he focused on the texture of the floor beneath his boots, the smooth yet unnerving coldness of the polished stone. This building, this carefully curated environment, felt less like a sanctuary and more like a cage. But there was something about it that made Varn uneasy, something beyond the obvious difference in scale and technology. It wasn't just the humans. Something in the air itself told him there was more at play here. "Have you considered what this means for your people?" Varn finally asked, his voice sharp. He needed answers, but he was beginning to feel the weight of not knowing. Dallin turned, his face tight but his words steady. "We've had no choice but to consider it, Captain. The truth is, we've kept secrets from the Council, not just about our technology, but about what we've been building. You think we've been waiting for you? No, we've been preparing." The words hung in the air, and for a moment it felt like the whole world was holding its breath. Varn stepped closer, studying Dallin's face. The president's expression was a blend of resolve and something else, something that didn't belong here, not in this moment of diplomacy. Furon shifted beside him, the faintest of exhalations slipping from his lips. "The Council will want answers," he said softly, more to himself than to anyone else. "They won't understand what you've been hiding." Dallin's eyes flicked to Furon, the subtle challenge in his gaze unmistakable. "We've done what was necessary," he replied, his words hardening. "You wouldn't understand. None of you would." Varn felt the shift in the room, the palpable change in energy. This wasn't going to be the simple diplomatic meeting they had anticipated. The veil had been lifted, and whatever secrets Earth held, whatever they had been hiding, it was only a matter of time before they would be exposed. His mind raced calculating, but for now, there was nothing he could do except follow this unpredictable path forward. He clenched his fist at his side, the cold weight of the situation pressing against his chest. They had no idea what they were walking into, and neither did he. The heavy door to the conference room slid shut behind them with a soft hiss, sealing them in a space where the walls gleamed, perfectly smooth, and every detail seemed carefully engineered. The room felt smaller than it should, boxed in by the transparent glass that overlooked the sprawling cityscape below. For a brief moment, Varn let his eyes wander across the city, humanity's creations sprawling into the horizon like veins branching from a heart. Yet something was missing. There was no organic rhythm, no pulse of life beneath the surface. It was all too ordered, too controlled. "Captain Varn," President Dallen's voice broke the silence, sharp and commanding. "You've seen enough to know that we are not as weak as you assume." His eyes locked with Varn's, unwavering. "We've been hiding our true strength for years. The Council doesn't know everything, not even close." Varn clenched his jaw, his eyes narrowing. The sudden shift in Dallen's tone caught him off guard. There was no longer any pretense of diplomacy. It felt like a declaration, a challenge. He stepped forward, narrowing the space between them. "What are you planning, Dallen? What is it that you think the Council won't understand?" The President stood taller now, his posture straight, exuding authority. "We've built something they won't expect. Our fleet, our weapons. They're not just advanced. They're beyond what you've seen. Earth will not be a pawn in this galactic game." His words held weight, but beneath them, Varn could sense a flicker of doubt, as if even Dallen didn't fully believe the words coming out of his mouth. The air in the room felt thick with tension, a tension that pressed on Varn's chest. He let his gaze drift past Dallen, resting on Furin, who had remained eerily silent since entering. The ambassador's antennae were motionless, a rare sign of discomfort. Varn caught his eye, and for the first time since arriving on Earth he saw a flicker of uncertainty there. "We don't have the luxury of time," Varn said, his voice steady, his mind calculating. "The Council won't be patient. They'll push for answers, for action." "I don't care what they think," Dallen replied sharply. His voice was edged with something darker now. "We've made our decision. Earth will stand alone, or Earth will rise. No more shadows." Varn's mind raced, trying to make sense of the words. Something about this planet, this mission, had shifted. Earth was hiding more than advanced technology. They were hiding a will, a resolve, that threatened to disrupt everything. The metaphorical scales of power had already begun to tip, but Varn hadn't realized just how much weight had been placed on one side until now. "Then what do you want from us?" Varn asked, the question slipping from his lips before he could fully process it. His eyes met Dallen's once again, trying to read his intentions, trying to decipher the truth of the situation. Dallen stepped closer, his eyes cold but resolute. "You'll see soon enough. Your council has no idea what you've walked into, Captain, but you'll learn. Soon." The room seemed to constrict, the weight of Dallen's words pressing down on him like the silence of space. Varn's breath slowed, and for the first time, the enormity of the situation settled in. Whatever Earth was hiding, it was more than just a fleet. The pieces of the puzzle were still scattered, but with each passing moment, they were falling into place. "Get ready," Dallen muttered, turning to face the darkened skyline. "This is just the beginning." Varn stood still, watching the lights of the city below flicker in patterns too precise to be natural. The words President Dallen had spoken echoed in his mind, twisting and stretching into a knot of uncertainty. Earth was hiding more than just a fleet. The notion settled deep in his chest like a weight that wouldn't shift. Whatever lay beneath the surface here, it was nothing like what he'd been led to believe. Furon moved beside him, his presence quiet but undeniable. The ambassador's steps were soft, almost imperceptible, but there was a tension in his posture, a sense of unease that Varn hadn't missed. "They've made their choice," Furon murmured, almost to himself. "But are they truly ready for the consequences?" Varn didn't respond immediately. Instead, his gaze remained fixed on the skyline, his mind whirring. The sudden shift in Earth's stance. It wasn't just the fleet. It was something more insidious. He could feel it in the thick, stagnant air, as though the atmosphere itself was holding its breath. The door to the room slid open with a soft hiss, and the human delegation re-entered, their faces colder than before. Dallin's presence was commanding, but something else lingered in his eyes now. The coolness in his expression was no longer merely diplomatic. It was as though the weight of his own decision had begun to press down on him. His eyes flicked toward Varn before he spoke. "It's time." The words hung in the air. Varn felt his pulse quicken. Time for what? His instincts screamed that they were walking into something far deeper than a diplomatic meeting. Whatever Earth had been hiding, it was about to be unveiled, and he wasn't sure he was ready for it. "You'll want to see this," Dallin added, his voice tinged with something that Varn couldn't quite place. A strange combination of urgency and dread. Without another word, Dallin turned and walked briskly toward the far side of the room, where a holographic map shimmered in midair. The room's temperature seemed to drop as the lights dimmed, casting long shadows on the walls. The low crackle of static filled the silence as the projection began to form, displaying vast, unseen stretches of space. But this wasn't the usual map of known systems. It was different. Strange, unfamiliar star systems blinked on the screen, marked with coordinates Varn didn't recognize. "What is this?" Varn's voice was sharp, a cutting edge to his words. Dallin didn't look back as he gestured toward the map. "These are systems we've secured, hidden even from the Council's gaze. And this," he tapped a point on the map, "is where we've been building." The coordinates locked into place, and the image expanded, revealing a massive installation, hidden deep within an asteroid belt, camouflaged in ways Varn couldn't fathom. His breath caught in his throat. This wasn't just a fleet. This was something far more advanced, something that could tip the balance of power in ways he could never have imagined. "Why didn't you tell us?" Varn's voice cracked, more from disbelief than anger. "We didn't have a choice," Dallin said, his words steady but heavy. "We had to keep it from the Council. We've kept our cards hidden for too long, waiting for the right moment. And now, that moment is here." The silence in the room deepened, as if the walls themselves were pressing in. Varn's mind raced, and he could feel the weight of what they were about to face. This wasn't just about the fleet anymore. This was a full-scale conflict, with Earth at the center of it, holding secrets that could alter the future of the galaxy. And just as quickly, a chill crawled up his spine. "What do you plan to do now?" Ferran's voice cut through the tension, soft, yet carrying an unmistakable edge. Dallin turned slowly, his face unreadable. Now we wait for the Council to make its move." Varn's stomach tightened. The real game had only just begun, and whatever Earth was hiding, they were about to see if it would break them, or break the galaxy. As the reality of Earth's concealed armaments settled into the consciousness of everyone present, a tension palpable as the electric charge before a storm hung over them. The room, bathed in the soft glow of the holographic display, cast eerie shadows that seemed to dance on the walls, reflecting the turbulent emotions of its occupants. "We need to act," Varn stated crisply, breaking the heavy silence. His voice resonated more than he intended, carrying a sharp edge that echoed slightly in the large, austere room. The air was tinged with a metallic scent, a byproduct of the advanced holographic technology in use, mixing strangely with the faint odor of leather from the high-backed chairs that lined the table. President Dallin nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing as he turned to face the holographic map once more. "Our installations are ready," he declared, tapping a sequence into the console. New points of light blinked into existence on the display, each representing a bastion of Earth's hidden might, spread across the dark tapestry of space like distant stars. Ferran, standing slightly apart from the group, shifted uncomfortably. The coolness of the room seemed to seep into his bones, a constant reminder of the chilling possibilities now unfolding. "And if the Council reacts with force?" he queried, his tone laced with a subtle undercurrent of concern. "They will," Varn responded, his gaze fixed on the map, "which is why our first strike must be decisive." The confidence in his statement did little to warm the chill that had settled over the room. Dallin moved closer to the display, his fingers hovering over a particularly dense cluster of lights near a strategic choke point in the galaxy. "Here," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "is where we'll make our stand. The Council's fleet will have to pass through this sector, with our defenses." He was interrupted by a sudden burst of static from the communication panel. Gorik, who had been quietly monitoring the Council's frequencies, turned towards them, his expression grave. "Captain, a Council fleet has been spotted at the edge of the sector. They're mobilizing." The news struck like a physical blow, sending a ripple of urgency through the room. Varn stepped forward, his resolve hardening. "How long do we have?" "Hours, maybe less," Gorik replied, his voice steady despite the dire news. The scent of ozone suddenly spiked as the room's systems worked overtime, processing the influx of data. It mixed oddly with the underlying sharpness of electronic circuitry, creating a tangible scent of danger. "We'll meet them head-on," Varn decided, his strategy clear. "Prepare all units for immediate deployment. This ends now, one way or another." As the group dispersed to carry out their orders, the low murmur of voices filled the room, each syllable a soft echo of the impending confrontation. The subtle scent of coffee from the morning's meeting lingered, a stark contrast to the sterile urgency that now pervaded the atmosphere. Dallin paused at the doorway, turning to give Varn a long, measured look. "This was always going to be the outcome," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "from the moment we chose to hide our strength." Varn nodded, understanding the weight of that decision. "And now," he added, "we see if that strength can hold." The door closed behind them with a soft click, sealing the room and its secrets within. Outside, the wind had picked up, howling softly around the corners of the building, as if it too sensed the storm to come. Outside, the chill of the impending conflict seeped into the bones of everyone present. The sky, a blanket of deep indigo, reflected the rising tension with its heavy, brooding clouds. Earth's defensive units, once hidden beneath the oceans and deep within mountain ranges, now emerged. Their metallic surfaces, cold and unyielding to the touch, glinted under the weak sunlight as they moved into formation, creating a stark contrast against the softness of the natural world around them. Captain Varn stood on the command deck of the Ravager, his eyes scanning the incoming data streams. The screens displayed a barrage of tactical information, each piece critical to the imminent confrontation. His nostrils filled with the sharp tang of ionized air, a byproduct of the ship's energy shields powering up, overlaying the usual sterile smell of the ship's interior. "The Council's fleet has entered the quadrant," Gorik announced, his voice cutting through the low buzz of activity. The tactical officer's hands moved deftly over the controls, updating their strategy in real time. Varn nodded sharply, his focus unwavering. "Signal all units. Initiate Maneuver Sigma 5. Encircle and contain," he commanded, his voice echoing with authority through the ship's communication system. As the Earth's fleet maneuvered into position, the distant stars seemed to watch in silent anticipation. The ships, a symphony of cold steel and calculated movements, danced a deadly ballet against the backdrop of space. The air was thick with the scent of anticipation, each breath heavy with the gravity of what was to come. In the distance, the first signs of the Council's fleet appeared like specters on the horizon of space, silent but undeniably threatening. The visual was stark. The sleek designs of the Council's ships were a harsh reminder of the galaxy's complex politics. Their approach was methodical, a contrast to the chaotic nature of the universe, yet there was a beauty in their formation, a deadly grace that was both mesmerizing and terrifying. "We're ready to engage," Furon spoke softly, his voice almost lost in the cascade of sensory overload. His expression was calm, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of concern for the lives at stake. Varn turned to him, his face set in grim determination. "Keep communications open. I want updates every 10 seconds. We can't afford any surprises." As the two fleets drew closer, the space between them charged with potential energy. The silence of the void was deceptive. It masked the thunderous clash of ideologies and weapons that was about to unfold. The Ravager shuddered slightly as its cannons charged, a vibration that ran through the deck like a shiver. Across the void, the first volley of the Council's energy weapons sliced through the darkness, a blaze of light that shattered the temporary stillness. The Earth's fleet responded in kind, their return fire a cascade of light and fury that painted the black canvas of space with streaks of destruction. Varn's heart raced as he watched the battle unfold. Each explosion, each maneuver brought them closer to a tipping point. The smell of scorched metal began to permeate the ship, a stark reminder of the fragility of their situation. As the battle raged, Varn remained focused on the tactical display, his mind working feverishly to stay one step ahead of the enemy. "This is just the beginning," he muttered under his breath, aware that the outcome of this conflict would ripple across the galaxy, reshaping boundaries and alliances. The fate of Earth and its place in the Council hung in the balance, suspended by the slender thread of their resolve against the overwhelming might of the galaxy's established powers. As the Ravager plunged deeper into the fray, the taste of imminent victory or defeat was palpable, filling the ship with a tension that was almost electric. The Ravager pierced through the maelstrom of battle, its hull resonating with the concussive blasts of nearby explosions. Each burst sent shivers through the metal underfoot, a constant reminder of the chaos unfolding outside. Captain Varn gripped the console, his knuckles white against the cold surface, as he surveyed the evolving battlefield with razor-sharp focus. "Captain, their flanks are weakening," Gorik reported, his voice crisp amid the cacophony of alerts and commands filling the bridge. The tactical display in front of them pulsed with the movements of countless ships, each represented by flickering lights that danced like fireflies against the backdrop of deep space. "Push forward! Target their command ship," Varn commanded, his words slicing through the tension like a blade. His eyes remained glued to the screen, watching as their fleet responded with a surge of coordinated aggression. The Council's ships recoiled under the onslaught, their formations beginning to fragment under the pressure. Outside, the stars were obscured by the debris of shattered vessels, the remnants drifting silently in the vacuum. The stench of burning circuits and heated metal permeated the Ravager, a tangible sign of the battle's intensity. The air tasted bitter, tinged with the metallic tang of ionized particles released by the ship's shields, repelling enemy fire. In the midst of the chaos, Furon stood slightly apart, his gaze locked on the distant flashes of light that marked the Council's faltering defenses. His presence was a silent, stabilizing force amid the storm, though his usually impassive features were etched with concern. "Keep the pressure," Varn muttered, almost to himself, as he orchestrated another volley from their main cannons. The ship trembled as the weapons discharged, sending pulses of energy hurtling into the void, their paths illuminated briefly by the cold, indifferent light of distant stars. The Council's return fire was desperate, less coordinated now, their strikes hitting the Ravager's shields with thuds that resonated through the hull. Each impact was a drumbeat, a relentless reminder of the enemy's resolve. "We're breaking through, Captain! Their center is buckling!" Gorik exclaimed, a note of triumph breaking through his typically unflappable demeanor. His fingers danced across the controls, feeding more data into the offensive systems. "Prepare to send the ground teams. We'll need boots on their hull if we're going to end this," Varn decided, his decision clear and immediate. "Gorik, coordinate the deployment." "Yes, sir," Gorik responded, turning back to his console to relay orders. His voice carried over the low buzz of activity, commanding yet precise, ensuring no command was lost in the din of war. As the Ravager surged forward, leading the charge, Varn felt the weight of command heavier than ever. The stakes were monumental, not just for him or his crew, but for Earth and its future in the galaxy. The battle was theirs to lose now, and victory was within reach. But at what cost? Outside, the darkness of space was lit by the eerie glow of fires burning on disabled ships, casting ghostly shadows that flickered and danced across the debris-strewn battlefield. It was a haunting reminder of the fragility of life amidst the vastness of the universe, a ballet of destruction choreographed on the grandest of stages, with Earth writing its own defiant narrative in the annals of galactic history. As the Ravager led Earth's forces deeper into the fray, the aftermath of each skirmish hung heavy in the void of space. The silence of the cosmos was pierced only by the sharp commands issued across the ship's communication systems and the distant echoes of explosions, which reverberated through the hull with each enemy ship's demise. Captain Varn, eyes narrowed in concentration, surveyed the tactical display. The shifting markers and trajectories painted a chaotic dance of death and strategy. "Gorik, status on the ground teams?" he called out, his voice steady despite the undercurrent of urgency that pulsed like a living thing through the bridge. "They've breached the Council's command ship, sir. Engaging enemy forces now," Gorik replied, his voice a beacon of clarity amidst the storm of sensory overload. The acrid tang of sweat mixed with the sharp scent of electricity sparked by overloaded circuits filled the air, a testament to the battle's intensity. Varn nodded curtly, turning his attention back to the external monitors. The view was a tapestry of destruction. Shattered hulls drifted past, their edges glowing dimly with residual heat, while distant stars looked on impassively. The cold touch of the metal floor beneath his boots grounded him, a constant reminder of the stark reality they faced. Suddenly, the ship jolted sharply, a direct hit to their shields. The lights flickered momentarily, casting ghostly shadows that danced across the faces of the crew. "Report!" Varn snapped, grasping the console to steady himself. "Shields at 76%, holding steady. That shot came from the secondary Council fleet. They're flanking us," a technician reported, his voice tinged with alarm. Varn's gaze hardened. "Reroute power to aft shields. Prepare to execute countermaneuvers. We can't let them box us in," he instructed, his command slicing through the tension. The metallic taste of adrenaline was sharp on his tongue as he prepared to take the battle into his own hands. Outside, the ballet of warfare continued unabated. Earth ships, nimble and relentless, wove through the Council's forces, a display of defiance and tactical brilliance. Varn watched as a particularly bold maneuver by one of the smaller frigates resulted in the destruction of a key Council warship, its bright explosion a brief flower of fire against the black canvas of space. "We're turning the tide," Furon observed quietly from his position by the window, his voice almost lost in the cascade of sensory details. The soft whir of the ship's life support systems, the distant vibrations of cannon fire, and the faint scent of burnt ozone that signaled a nearby ship's breach. Varn allowed himself a moment to glance at Furon, noticing the slight relaxation in the ambassador's shoulders, a stark contrast to the rigid tension that had characterized his earlier demeanor. "Let's make sure it stays turned," Varn replied, his voice a low growl of determination. As the Ravager pivoted, dodging another volley from the Council's reinforcements, the strategic display updated in real time. New blips appeared, signaling the arrival of additional Earth reinforcements, a calculated risk that now seemed to be paying off. "This isn't just a battle," Varn said, more to himself than to anyone else, his eyes scanning the horizon of stars and debris. "It's a statement." Behind him, the crew worked with renewed vigor, buoyed by the captain's confidence and the visible signs of their advancing position. Each order was carried out with precision, each movement a testament to their training and resolve. As Earth's fleet pressed forward, a new chapter in their history was being written in the light of exploding stars and the resolve of those who dared to defy the galaxy. As the Ravager and its fleet surged ahead, forging a path through the cosmic chaos, Captain Varn's keen eyes were fixed on the battle's shifting dynamics. The strategic displays pulsed with new information, each update mapping the contours of a conflict that was far from decided. The air in the bridge crackled with tension, the sharp scent of electric discharge mingling with the more earthy tones of human exertion. "Captain, we've intercepted a transmission," Gorik announced, his voice cutting through the sounds of orders being issued and data being analyzed. "It's encrypted, but preliminary decryptions suggest the Council is regrouping for a counterstrike deeper in the sector." Varn's brow furrowed, his gaze never leaving the tactical screen. "Pinpoint their rally point. We intercept them before they consolidate their forces," he ordered, his voice resonant and commanding. The crew adjusted their instruments, the subtle clicks and taps of their work, a low symphony beneath the overarching melody of war. The bridge vibrated subtly beneath their feet, a constant reminder of the massive engines propelling them through space, their thrust almost silent in the vacuum, but palpable through the ship's frame. As the coordinates were set, the Ravager's trajectory shifted slightly, aligning it with the suspected rendezvous location of the Council's fleet. The stars outside the viewport streaked by in blurs of light as the ship sped through the cosmos, each a distant sun caught in the middle of its own life story, indifferent to the dramas unfolding in its light. "Prepare all squads. This will be a full assault," Varn stated, turning to address his officers. The urgency of his command galvanized the crew, their movements quickening, a dance of fingers on controls and swift exchanges of critical information. Meanwhile, Furin, ever watchful, approached Varn quietly. "Captain, we must consider the aftermath. Victory here could shift the galactic balance. We're treading into waters more turbulent than you realize." Varn glanced at him, a nod acknowledging the gravity of his words. "I'm aware," he replied tersely, "but we didn't start this. We're going to finish it." The Ravager approached the meeting point, sensors alert for any sign of the enemy fleet. The tension was palpable, the air thick with the anticipation of conflict and an undercurrent of something else, something akin to fear, but edged with the thrill of the unknown. Suddenly, the silence was broken by a sharp beep from the communication console. "Contact! Multiple signatures detected bearing straight for us," Gorik called out, his voice a sharp spike in the otherwise controlled chaos of the bridge. "All hands! Battle stations!" Varn's command boomed through the ship, every word a hammer strike against the anvil of impending battle. The crew responded with practiced efficiency, their actions precise despite the adrenaline that undoubtedly coursed through them. As the first signs of the Council fleet appeared on the horizon, a series of bright flashes against the dark tapestry of space, the Ravager braced for the impact. The clash was imminent, a meeting of titanic forces under the watchful eyes of a million stars. Varn stood firm, his resolve as unyielding as the steel walls that surrounded him. The future of Earth and its place in the cosmos hung in the balance, and he was ready to define it with fire and fury. As the Council fleet materialized from the darkness of space, the Ravager and its accompanying ships prepared to confront the emerging threat. Varn's eyes narrowed, focusing on the looming silhouettes that cut sharply against the backdrop of star-studded blackness. The atmosphere on the bridge thickened with tension, every officer braced for the critical moments ahead. "Launch fighters! Target their main artillery units," Varn commanded, his voice resonant and imbued with the calm of a seasoned leader. The tactical officer nodded and relayed the orders, his fingers a blur over the illuminated console. The silence that followed was punctuated by the distant roar of engines as Earth's fighters deployed, streaking through space like comets. The faint vibrations of the Ravager's deck beneath their feet offered a constant reminder of the ship's massive engines at work, propelling them into the heart of battle. Outside, the visual field was a chaos of light and motion. Council ships unleashed volleys of plasma fire, brilliant against the void. Each explosion sent ripples through space, the impacts absorbed by the shields with a shudder felt throughout the vessel. Gorik updated in real time. "Enemy formation breaking, sir. Our flank units have successfully executed the pincer move." His report cut through the crackle of static and the sharp scent of overheated electronics that filled the air. "Good. Push forward. Let's end this quickly," Varn replied, steel in his tone. He glanced towards Furan, who watched the battle unfold with an unreadable expression. His presence was a quiet force on the bridge, his observations often providing a necessary balance to Varn's aggressive strategies. As the Ravager pressed on, a sudden burst of enemy fire came dangerously close, the proximity alarm blaring briefly before being silenced by the ship's automated systems. The near miss left a tang of ionization in the air, a stark reminder of their vulnerability despite their formidable presence. "We have them on the run, Captain. Their rear guard is collapsing," reported a sensor operator, her voice a beacon amidst the storm of sensory input that flooded the bridge. Varn nodded sharply. "Prepare to send in the boarding parties. Target their flagship. I want their command taken down from the inside." As the boarding parties prepared for deployment, the ship's internal atmosphere grew heavy with the scent of oil and metal, the usual odors of machinery and human determination mingling in the confined space. Each member of the crew was acutely aware of the stakes. Their actions in the next few minutes could very well determine the outcome of not just this battle, but of the entire conflict. The bridge fell into a focused silence, punctuated only by the soft tapping of commands into consoles and the occasional status update. The distant echoes of battle filtered through the structure of the ship, a constant reminder of the chaos just beyond their armored hull. As the Ravager maneuvered into position, the vast expanse of space around them seemed to hold its breath. Stars twinkled distantly, indifferent observers to the historic confrontation unfolding in their midst. Varn stood resolute, watching the holographic displays as they plotted the trajectories and impacts, each calculation bringing them closer to a decisive victory or a catastrophic defeat. With a final confirmatory nod from Gorik, Varn gave the order. "Execute boarding sequence. This ends today." The weight of his command resonated through the bridge, a definitive stroke in the narrative they were all crafting, one fraught with danger, but driven by an unyielding pursuit of victory. As the Ravager moved into position, Captain Varn monitored the precise deployment of boarding teams to the Council's flagship. The once distant silhouettes of enemy ships were now imminent threats, looming large on the tactical displays. The air was tense, saturated with a mix of anticipation and the sharp tang of gunmetal, a byproduct of the weapon systems at full readiness. "Boarding teams Alpha and Gamma report successful entry," Gorik announced, his voice steady despite the stakes. His eyes were glued to the screen, tracking the progress of the teams through the intricate corridors of the Council's flagship. Varn's focus was unyielding. "Direct Beta Team to the engine control room. I want that ship disabled," he commanded, the strategy clear in his mind. This was the pivot upon which the battle would turn, a calculated strike at the heart of the enemy's power. Outside, the void of space was a tableau of chaos and destruction. Debris from shattered vessels spiraled silently, catching the light from distant stars and the ongoing flashes of combat. The smell of scorched metal seeped through the ship's filtration system, a reminder of the destruction just beyond their shields. As the Ravager's cannons continued to fire, the sounds of battle were muffled by the thick hull, yet each blast sent a vibration through the deck, felt more than heard. Varn watched the holographic display intently, each movement of the boarding teams marked by a blinking light on the schematic of the Council's ship. "Sir, Beta Team has reached the engine control," reported a communications officer, her voice a contrast to the low buzz of operational noise filling the bridge. "Tell them to proceed with the sabotage plan. Time it with Alpha and Gamma's assault on the bridge and weapon systems," Varn instructed, his strategy unfolding with precision. The ship's atmosphere was thick with the heavy scent of electronic burning, a sign of systems pushed to their limits. Minutes felt like hours as Varn awaited confirmation of the mission's success. Finally, the comm crackled to life. "Objective achieved. Engines are offline," came the crisp, triumphant report from Beta Team. A collective breath seemed to be released throughout the Ravager, the tension dissipating slightly, only to be replaced by a new, sharp focus. "All units, prepare for the final push. This is where we end it," Varn declared, his voice resonant through the command bridge. Simultaneously, the tactical display showed Alpha and Gamma teams securing critical areas within the enemy flagship. The Council's response was fragmented, their communications disrupted by the precise strikes of Earth's forces. "Commander, the Council is signaling for parley," Gorik suddenly interrupted, his update cutting through the din. Varn paused, processing the shift. "On screen," he ordered, his gaze shifting to the main viewer. The image that appeared was of the Council's commander, his expression one of begrudging respect. "We wish to discuss terms," he stated, the strain evident in his voice. Varn stood tall, his figure imposing against the backdrop of the battle-weary bridge. "We will discuss terms on our grounds. Stand down and prepare to be boarded." As the transmission ended, Varn turned back to his crew, his face set in determination. The battle was nearing its end, but the true test of their resolve was just beginning. The planning had been meticulous, the execution nearly flawless, and now the payoff was within reach. The scent of victory was as palpable as the metallic tang in the air, signaling a new dawn for Earth's place in the galaxy. With the Council's flagship disabled, and their commander seeking parley, The balance of power shifted palpably in favor of Earth's forces. Varn stood before the main screen of the Ravager, his silhouette stark against the backdrop of the cosmos, the distant stars witnessing the birth of a new power dynamic within the galaxy. "Prepare to establish a secure link for negotiations," Varn instructed Gorik, his voice echoing slightly in the suddenly quiet bridge. The scent of overheated electronics lingered in the air, a residual sign of the battle's intensity. Gorik nodded, his fingers swiftly navigating the control panel. "Link established, Captain. We're ready to proceed whenever you are." Varn turned his attention to the screen, where the image of the Council's commander reappeared. "This battle could have led to significant losses on both sides," Varn began, his tone firm but fair. "It's time to discuss a sustainable ceasefire." The commander, his face etched with the fatigue of conflict, nodded slowly. "We underestimated Earth's capabilities and resolve. It's clear now that further aggression would only lead to mutual destruction. What terms do you propose?" Varn's reply was measured, reflecting the gravity of the moment. "Immediate cessation of hostilities. We demand recognition of Earth's sovereignty and an equal seat at the Council table. In return, we will halt our advance and discuss formal peace treaties." The Council's commander listened intently, his eyes narrowing as he processed the terms. After a moment, he responded, "I must consult with my superiors. I will return with an answer shortly." The screen blinked off, leaving the bridge in a reflective silence. Turning away from the now dark screen, Varn faced his crew. "Well done, everyone. Let's prepare for the next phase. This isn't just a victory, it's a chance to change our destiny." His words resonated, not just as a command, but as the promise of a new era. As the crew dispersed to carry out their duties, Furon approached Varn. "A bold move, Captain, but even if they agree to the terms, the real challenge will be maintaining peace." Varn nodded, acknowledging the complexity of their situation. "True peace is never easy, but today we've shown that Earth is not a threat to be neutralized, but a power to be reckoned with." The ship's atmosphere was charged with a mix of relief and anticipation. As they awaited the Council's response, the crew attended to their stations, the gentle vibrations of the ship a comforting reminder of their continued vigilance. Meanwhile, Varn returned to the tactical display, reviewing the positions of their forces and the status of the Council fleet. Each ship's marker was a story of courage and strategy, and now they were poised at the brink of historic change. The commander reappeared on the screen, his expression more composed. "The Council agrees to your terms, Captain Varn. We are prepared to cease hostilities and invite Earth to the Council." A murmur of satisfaction rippled through the bridge. Varn's face remained impassive, but his eyes reflected the significance of their achievement. "Inform the Council we accept their proposal. Prepare for formal negotiations." As the transmission ended, the weight of their success settled over Varn. Outside, the cosmos lay vast and uncharted, mirroring the unknown future they now faced. But for the moment, Earth stood united, ready to navigate the complexities of peace as deftly as they had waged war. In the aftermath of Earth's triumphant stand, the Ravager became a symbol of humanity's resilience and newfound respect in the galaxy. Captain Varn stood at the helm, watching as the stars glimmered like distant beacons, their light casting a serene glow over the bridge. The silence of space enveloped the ship, a stark contrast to the recent cacophony of battle. "Captain, the Council has confirmed the meeting coordinates. We are to proceed to the Galactic Core, where Earth will formally be granted its seat," Gorik informed him, his voice reverberating slightly in the quiet of the bridge. "Set course," Varn commanded, his tone imbued with the gravity of their mission. As the Ravager shifted course, the starlight seemed to dance, reflecting off the console's sleek surfaces. The journey to the Galactic Core was a silent procession through the stars, each member of the crew lost in their own thoughts about the future. The air was thick with anticipation, a blend of apprehension and excitement mingling subtly. Upon their arrival, the grandeur of the Galactic Council's assembly was overwhelming. The vast chamber, carved from the heart of an ancient asteroid, was filled with representatives from 1,000 star systems. The air vibrated with the low murmur of countless alien languages, a tapestry of sound that underscored the diversity of the galaxy. Captain Varn, flanked by Furin and Gorik, stepped forward into the chamber, their footsteps echoing softly on the polished stone floor. As they approached the central dais, the murmurs hushed, hundreds of eyes turning to regard the newcomers with a mixture of curiosity and respect. The Earth has long stood in the shadows, underestimated by those who saw us as primitive and unworthy, Varn began, his voice strong and clear, resonating across the chamber. Today we claim our place among you, not as supplicants, but as equals, not just for our own sake, but for the sake of a galaxy that thrives on diversity and strength. A murmur of assent rippled through the assembly, the air charged with the power of his words. Let this be a new beginning, Varn continued, where no world believes itself too small or too weak to be heard. We stand ready to contribute, to learn, and to defend the values of this council. The High Chancellor of the Council, a venerable figure whose visage flickered with the light of 1,000 worlds, rose from his seat. Captain Varn of Earth, your words remind us all of the principles upon which this council was founded. It is with great honor that we welcome Earth into our midst. As the chamber erupted in applause, a deep resonant sound that filled the space with vibrant energy. Varn stood firm, a solitary figure against the backdrop of the galaxy's most powerful leaders. Later, as the Ravager prepared to depart, Varn gazed out at the expanse of space, a vast frontier that now felt a little more like home. To the stars, he whispered, a promise made not just to himself, but to all of humanity. The story of Earth's ascension would be told across the galaxy, a tale of a world that rose from isolation to stand amongst the stars, stunning a galactic council that had once doubted its potential. This was humanity's grand entrance into the cosmic arena, a testament to their spirit and tenacity. And as the Ravager sailed back towards Earth, it carried not just a crew of spacefarers, but a beacon of hope for every underdog in every corner of the universe. Humanity had not just arrived, they had prevailed.